Okay. So this is my chemical research, and I did both of them in the same PowerPoint. So this is my chemical research, and I did it. So my first one is chemical in foods, and this one it isn't like a deliberate like ingredient in the food, but it is there as kind of like a result from like cooking it not properly. So that's what's going on here. And it is in quite a bit of food, and specifically foods that are more like starchy or more like stuff like with potato or I think bread, stuff with starch in it, like cereals, store-bought cereals, french fries, store-bought potato chips for sure, a lot of those kind of things. And specifically, they all have this chemical called acrylamide. And acrylamide is present in these foods. The thing is, acrylamide is in the foods not as like an ingredient that's added to it. It's a byproduct from improper cooking. And so like frying the chips or frying the french fries or toasting bread or toast like too much can make certain chemicals that are like naturally in the food turn into acrylamide, which is actually quite harmful to people, especially when consumed through food and foods like these. And so basically, acrylamide, it's an unsaturated amide. And this chemical, like I said before, it's commonly found in starchy foods, and it's formed from chemicals that are naturally in the food when they're baked or cooked or fried improperly. And this is usually once they're like too crispy or if they get like too burnt, then they can form these harmful chemical compounds that can actually harm people and cause negative side effects. And so this is like an overall look at the toxicity from the website here. I have them all cited towards the end, but this one it can show you here the actual structure of the molecule. And with the molecule, it the structure itself is what makes it harmful. The fact that it's so reactive because of the unsaturated double bonds on the crystal compound here that's shown on the third picture up here, and because of the double bonds and the electrons, it like makes it really reactive and unstable. And so once it gets into the body, it can cause like a lot of not exactly optimal things to happen. Because it's a polar molecule, it can dissolve into water, and therefore it gets around inside the body easier than if it was not polar and not water soluble. And so here you can also see it's acutely toxic and obviously a health hazard. And this also shows the actual molecular formula of acrylamide. And it also says a lot more, but this was what I thought was most important to be able to see the structure and really focus on the molecular makeup of acrylamide and how that actually makes it harmful in the body when ingested. So for toxicology, I looked it up, and so short term, it's obviously a neurotoxin, and more long term, it's more of a neurotoxicity and can cause cancer. And like more like just in general side effects, it can cause nerve cell interference because it can inhibit the nerve cells and how they function, and this can actually cause some neurological issues in the long term when too much of it is like consumed or too much exposure happens. So common foods with acrylamide. I've said these before, but there's French fries, potato chips, breakfast cereals, toast, really anything with like starch in it. And especially obviously if they're being cooked improperly, if they're burnt, like when potato chips, like there's the burnt ones, toast, too much toast, any of the cereal really that could just be like not cooked quite as correctly as it should be. And so this is my slide here is basically explaining like why it should be like a concern. So in 2010, this particular chemical was found to cause health concerns, and it caused cancer and death in animals. And the FDA is still doing more research on this as well, like also showing like how much of a concern that it really should be. And the natural medicine, the National Library of Medicine says that any of this that's consumed is absorbed into the body. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the molecular structure earlier, it being water soluble, and polar molecule makes it so that it can cause more issues in the body and does not just get like excreted like normal things that go through the body that shouldn't be there. So long-term side effects. Okay, long-term side effects. Obviously cancer, as I said before. Um, a lot of these like harmful chemicals that like I came across when looking into this project are all carcinogenic, and a lot of them cause like all these different concerns. This one particularly, I focus a lot on neurological damage on this specific chemical because that was the main like issue with consuming too much of this chemical. And so with the molecular, some more molecular level understanding, I found that it's pretty stable, and so it's really hard for it to like eventually like break down in the body, like because of course like the the human body like tries to like break down things or get rid of things that shouldn't be there. um as well with neurological issues, it also binds to the proteins specifically in the neurological pathways that like inhibit it, and this will cause nerve signaling processes to be not functioning properly. um like I said, a lot of this stuff has been said before, but this is more like detail. And when the chemical itself is even just like processed in the body, it also turns into like a more reactive and more destructive, harmful chemical. And so there's really nothing good about this chemical, and it should probably be avoided. And so that brings me to my next point. How can you actually avoid this chemical? And so that would be by consuming less processed chips and cereals, basically trying to make your own food more, or staying away from like potato chips and stuff. And obviously, you could just cook at home because if you're the one cooking, then it won't be burnt unless you burn it. I mean, then yeah, that's not good. So my conclusion here, it's kind of like a thesis conclusion, and I wrote that when discussing whether products like chips, cereals, and french fries should be banned, allowed, or restricted, one should take into consideration the neurotoxic effects that the chemical poses and focus on minimizing consumption of improperly cooked starchy foods. And of course, I already explained that throughout the rest of my slides. And so now I'm going to be talking about chemicals in common household goods. So the products is candles, and really anything with like an unnatural aromatic like aerosols, stuff like that. Candles, of course, these things that have these smells that aren't exactly natural, but like we put them in our houses, of course. In the chemical that I'm going to be focusing on here is benzopyrene. And this is its molecular structure here. And those are carbon rings, and they have like hydrogens on them. And it's really not good for you. So, benzopyrene or benzene, benzopyrene is more specific, but benzopyrene is a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, or a PAH for short, and it is harmful when it's released into the air, especially when it's indoors. It serves as like a pollutant and it can cause irritation and long term side effects, of course. And here's a candle because it's in candles a lot, which is what I'm focusing on in this specific presentation. And so this is an overall look at benzopyrene and its structure in general. And so you can tell here, as this website that I've also used on the last one, this one says it serves as an irritant, a health hazard, and an environmental hazard because of its structure. It's actually really hard to break down, even like in the environment or even in like a human. Once it gets into the body, it's kind of hard for the body to be able to break it down, similar to the last one really, but this one's actually really stable instead of reactive, which makes it so hard to get rid of or to get out of the body. And so that's why this one can be quite harmful. And here you can again see the molecular structure, the carbon rings, and its molecular formula. And and you can also tell how it being fat soluble makes it have more long-term side effects, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. So toxicology wise, benzopyrene is short term, it's more of a low acute risk. It like if you just inhale the chemicals for a little bit, it's really not that bad. But later on, if you're exposed to it over time, continuously exposed to benzopyrene or benzene chemical, it's a potential it's a it's potentially carcinogenic, and that's because it actually causes genetic mutation because of the structure and how it fits into the DNA itself, making it harder to replicate. And when it's harder to make the replication, the RNA, it's harder to make a correct protein, meaning the genetic mutation causes proteins to be incorrectly made, which makes not working proteins, meaning that the proteins that are supposed to be facilitating bodily functions aren't being made properly. And so, of course, this can lead to genetic mutations and, of course, cancer. Um, so, household products containing benzene, like I said before, we have candles, we have dry shampoos, aerosols. There's also like perfume, any kind of things that have like not natural smells and that are put into the air. And usually these are like in cheaper candles that like I don't know if you get them at Walmart or something. If they're cheap, they probably have this in them, and they're probably a little bit harmful based on what I've researched here. And so, why it's a concern? Throughout my research, I used a bunch of different sources for these kinds of things, but which I also cited at the end. Benzopyrene has been linked to like causing pneumonia, has been also linked to causing urothelial cancer. And so these things, they're not all just connected to the respiratory system because, like I said, it can stay in the body and doesn't get quite broken down as it should be. And it's also linked to petroleum, which is used in so many candles because it's like a cheaper alternative than using more natural substances, and it's in all these like fake perfumes and like fake candles. Like any of like the really cheap candles is going to have this stuff in it, and it really just acts as an irritant and a potential carcinogen in the long term. And of course, as I said before, it's linked to cancer, it's linked to respiratory concerns, respiratory irritation. It's also an environmental hazard as it stays in the environment for a really long time and it doesn't really get broken down and it can really spread. And of course, it's also linked to genetic sequencing alterations, which also links back to the cancer because of incorrect genetic sequencing causing incorrect RNA, causing incorrect proteins, and then like the cell growth is all messed up, and mutations can form because of that. And so back to molecular understanding again. This molecule is it's flat and hydrophobic, meaning, as I said before, it can actually lodge itself into the DNA sequences. And because it lodges itself in the DNA, it makes the genetic sequencing able to cause mutations in the long term from too much exposure to benzopyrene. And as I said before, because it's really stable and non-polar, it's really hard for the body to detoxify and get rid of. How can you avoid this? I would say you could avoid harmful aerosols like the spray deodorant, the dry shampoo, the Febreze. Febreze has this too. Febreze has a lot of stuff that's not good, but specifically this. You could also look for candles with more natural ingredients. You could use like the beeswax candles, the soy candles. I think this picture right here is actually a soy candle, so this one's safe. And I would also avoid cheap and scented candles because those, like, if you just get a more expensive one, it probably has more natural ingredients and less harmful or carcinogenic or irritating substances like benzopyrene. And of course, unlike the other one, this one isn't really a natural ingredient. This one is more caused by like the combustion of the chemical itself not being completely done. So it kind of like makes the thing more harmful in a way. And so this one, like the other one, was more of like a byproduct from a natural resource. This one is like completely avoidable, and it's not even like just from cooking, it's like actually put in them, and you can get alternatives. And so that's what you should really do with these candles and the aerosols and whatever. And so basically, my conclusion for this one was similar to the last one, but I said specifically when considering whether products like candles, aerosols, and deodorants containing benzopyrene should be avoided, one should take into consideration its carcinogenic effects and minimize exposure to the chemical itself. And of course, I already provided alternatives and how to go about doing that. And yeah, I think here is all my citing. I have stuff from like the FDA, the ChemPub, I think is what it was called, the CDC, a lot of toxicological profiles for these different chemicals, and I have some stuff from all these different places. And yeah, that's my presentation. I think it's done now.